An empty stage, no audience. When we were planning this event back in September of 2019, we knew we wanted to celebrate our birthday. TEDx Hochschule Luzern started back in 2016 and is now in its 5th year. So we took an obvious theme, the Big Five. This number has many connotations in the Western world: the Big Five personality traits, the 5 stages of denial, the 5 regrets of the dying, to name a few. But if you had Googled the Big Five global challenges at that time, almost nobody, not even TED, addressed a problem that now faces us all: pandemics. Suddenly, globally, overnight, a microscopic biological agent has radically disrupted our social structures and our lives. So when we were asked if we were going to cancel this event, my response was immediate. No, of course not. Why should we? Behind the scenes of TEDx Hochschule Luzern, there are 42 highly motivated students, digital natives, from 27 countries in our master's program. If anyone can pull off an online event, they can. My thanks go out to them and our speakers in China, India, Singapore, and other places around the world, including Switzerland, for putting in the extra effort to make this event happen. In the current global lockdown, many have spoken about remote and distance working. Yet we have experienced all those video conferences in the last several weeks and months as very personal, even intimate, at times touching. We have seen into the lives and living rooms of friends, colleagues, and total strangers in a way never possible before. And what we learned brought us closer. Our boss also has a cat. We are not the only ones whose children crave attention. Our otherwise well-kept colleagues also have bad hair days. Unthinkable without technology. So no, an online event is not the same as meeting in person. But that doesn't make it worse. Perhaps in some ways, it's even better. In this spirit, and following the 5 elements that form the theme of our event tonight, I'd like you to consider the following 5 thoughts. Feel free to comment in our online chat. The first, we are currently experiencing a black swan, an event that no one could predict and that has huge consequences. So consider this. What changes to our social systems has Corona induced, and what will the post-Corona world look like? The second, despite an overwhelming surplus of information and openly available data, not all of what we hear on a daily basis is grounded in fact. As TED speaker Hans Rosling says, we can easily reduce our stress levels by only holding opinions grounded in fact. Thirdly, fire is one of the greatest technologies ever harnessed by humans. It can enhance our lives, but also destroy them. The same is true of the internet. It is merely technology. Yet it has made the global lockdown far more bearable than it would have been only 20 years ago. And finally, overnight, we have seen an explosion of resourcefulness and creativity not induced by freedom, but by restrictions. Our fixed habits and mindsets suddenly became fluid, and we were forced to think differently. Do we really need a crisis every time to do so? So these 4 elements, black swans from thin air, information grounded in fact, the spark of technology, the fluidity of social systems, and the 5th, of course, us. We all have the power to harness these elements and create our world anew. And now, I'd like to thank you, our viewers, for celebrating our 5th birthday with us. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this year's very special TEDx event, which you have probably noticed that it is a live stream event. Not only it is on a different medium, but it is also the 5th year of TEDx Hochschule Luzern event. My name is Raisa Kartika, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. Tonight, our speakers and you, the viewers at home, are going to explore the Big Five and how they affect our lives in the 21st century. On this night, from the comfort of your own homes, you can live stream the speakers and also participate in the live chat to ask questions to the speakers during the break. I'd like to welcome all viewers from around the world tuning in to our very first digital event. We will have 9 speakers lined up for you tonight, and we will have 2 live sessions with the speakers. One will be during the break, which will be in the middle of the event, and the final one will be at the end of the show, so stay tuned. Now, I would like you to get ready for the night, to feel inspired, and to also enjoy the show. Now, on to our first speaker. He is a self-made entrepreneur, the co-founder and CEO of the sustainable clothing brand called NIKIN here in Switzerland. From each product sold, Nicholas plants 1 tree, and he is now responsible for planting more than 500,000 trees around Switzerland. NIKIN has been in the top 3 of the Swiss Economic Award in 2019 and has won the prize for the Swiss Brand of the Year award for the best cost-benefit ratio in the Swiss clothing industry. Nicholas started his business with only 5,000 Swiss francs and without any help from investors. He has won many awards for his company and is currently leading 30 employees with his vision. His speech today will include tips on how to start a business without investors and a huge sum of money. So, let's walk down memory lane to where Nicholas started his inspiring journey. Let's welcome our first speaker, Nicholas Hänny, with his topic, How to Start Your Own Business Without Investors.
Hello everybody, I'm Nicholas Hänny. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a startup, a young sustainable clothing brand that plants 1 tree for each product that we sell. But I'm not here today to talk about sustainability or tree planting. I'm here to talk about how to build a business without investors. I'm talking about that because I built my business with only 5,000 francs and we don't have any investors up to this point. So 2 things I want to tell you before I start talking about my tips. The first thing is we never had a business plan and never needed one. So that's one thing I want to tell you, just start without the business plan. And the second thing is that the 5 tips I'm going to give you now are actually pretty basic and simple and might seem obvious to most of you. But I'm trying to go and putting it into context that you see some examples of how we dealt with that. So the first tip is actually pretty simple. It's not about the idea, it's about the implementation. What I mean with that is that a lot of times people come to me telling me, hey, I want to start my own business, but I don't have the idea, I don't know what to do. But the thing that I'm telling them then is that you don't need a great idea. It's not about the idea that you're successful, it's about the implementation. So you don't need a great idea to start and neither to be successful. I want to give you now 3 examples of companies that exactly did that. The first example is actually a pretty famous one. It's of actually the biggest social network in the world. It's Facebook. Facebook, when it started, it was a terrible idea in my opinion. They wanted to build a social network, which at that point was already pretty a bad idea because MySpace was huge. MySpace dominated it. Facebook also only started with Harvard students, but after time they started to implement it better, had better ideas, improved it, and now they're one of the biggest companies in the world. The second tip might be a little bit less, or example might be a little bit less famous. It's Lyft. Lyft is basically the same as Uber. Uber started in the States, and actually everybody knows what Uber is now. So Lyft took the same idea, and usually it's a bad idea just to copy someone, but they did it better. They implemented the stuff better. In the process, did certain things better. And now in certain cities, they're actually bigger than Uber. Then the third example is maybe the most famous one. It's Google. Google was not the first search engine. It was not the great idea to just do another search engine when they started. But as you know, they improved their algorithm better, their search engine is better, and now they're the biggest one in the world. So all of them actually just started with not a very great idea, but implemented it much better. So just do something. It's not about the idea, it's about the implementation. Now let me go over to the second tip. The second tip is to not strive for perfection. So what I mean with that is when you start a business, you usually don't really have a lot of money. You cannot afford the people that are the experts to either work for you or pay them that they consult you and help you. So it means you have to do everything yourself, and that's not always that easy. So let me give you actually 4 personal examples of how we did that. So the first example is of our first t-shirt that we had. The first t-shirts were from Asia, and only then we shifted it to Europe. But we didn't know that the sizes from Asia are totally different from European sizes. So our XL was actually more like an M, and customers are not that happy about it. However, we sold the product, we got feedback, we learned about it, and by that we got better and better and better, and it was much better just do it and sell it, and by that have a faster learning phase. So that was already very important. Now, the second example is of our first photo shooting in Switzerland, where we started to take product pictures for ourselves. We didn't have money to pay a photographer. We were thinking of it, but it was just way too expensive. So our setup that you can see is only like $30. The lamp was from a local construction site. The camera was borrowed from a friend. The thing I have in my hand in the picture is styrofoam. And the thing in the background, this is actually the only thing that cost us $30. The pictures were not great, but they were good enough to start. And by that, we got, again, feedback. We learned, and we were faster than like others who waited for perfect pictures. So now the third thing is an Instagram post from us in the beginning. If you look at it, it looks pretty horrible in my opinion. But we posted more than other companies. We had a higher posting frequency. We got by that more engagement, more comments, more likes, more everything. And in the end, we actually won by that. We also learned which posts work well, which not, and it was just more important to just do it rather than waiting for the perfect post. Now the last example is actually my favorite example because it's our first towel that we had. Our first towel though had a problem. When you went to the beach or to the local swimming pool and you were lying on the grass or on the beach and you took it up the towel, you basically ripped away all the leaves and all the grass, so you took away almost the whole forest. That was horrible. Customers hated it, but some actually liked it. But nevertheless, we learned from it. You learn more about material. The next one was much better. And again, we sold it. We got some more customers and so on. And that was super important to not wait for the perfect product, to just do it. Now the third tip. The third tip is also pretty obvious, and many people of you know that probably. But it's ask for help. A lot of times we just ask people, be it people we know, be it complete strangers, if they could help us in something. And you'll be amazed at how many people actually want to help, how much good there's out there. And also don't forget, the worst thing that can happen is when you ask to just get a no. So let me give you two examples, of which the first one is more of a personal one. In the picture you can see the parents of my co-founder. In the beginning we had a lot of demand for our winter hats, so we asked them if they could help us actually manufacture them. So you see them stitching the labels onto the winter hats. They also packed until 3 in the morning our orders, and also we asked friends if they could help us. And all of them helped us for free, so you just have to ask. But it's not only about people you know, it's also about complete strangers. So the next example shows a situation when we moved into a new office and we needed new furniture. We thought that it might be that it would make more sense to actually use used furniture, so we asked if some people have it in the cellar, because all of you probably also have some furniture they don't use in their cellar. So 17 people commented, 20 people direct messaged me, and in the end you had more offers for good furniture than we actually needed. So this actually shows that in the end, you just have to ask. The worst thing you can get is a no. And if you don't know how to ask the right people, go on LinkedIn, Google it. There's many, many, many places where you can find out who to ask in the end. Now the next tip. Also a simple one, but if you don't have a lot of money and you're starting your own business, super important. It's be flexible, and by flexible I mean be really, really, really flexible. It's again the same story. You cannot hire people that are doing the hard work for you. You cannot hire people that do 24/7 customer service for you. You have to do most of the things yourself in the beginning. So I'll also give you examples. The first example is an example of our first meetings. We did not have an office, we did not have the money to rent one, so we had to do meetings in bars or restaurants. We did that either before our regular jobs or studies or afterwards. As you can see in the picture, it was of course afterwards now in this situation, and we did that for around 1.5 years until we could actually afford our first real office. Now the next example is, if you look at the picture, it's a toilet, and you might ask yourselves, why the hell is the toilet in the picture? So that was a place where I had to work a lot. It was super important for me. It is because we did customer service ourselves, and when you got a customer service request, you had to answer it pretty fast. So I used these 5 minutes doing whatever people do in the toilet to tell customers, yes, you can send back the package, and yes, we're going to send you another one. I did that all the time, I had to, as well as using 5 minutes in the bus to write an email. And these minutes and this flexibility really, really matters in the beginning. So now, going to the last tip. The last tip is that you should read the best book in the world. A lot of times I get asked by people, how do I do marketing? How do I find a supplier? How do I do video editing? How do I do this, that, or this? And first of all, if you go back to tip number 3, of course I help them in that moment. But at the same time, I also tell them, hey, read the best book in the world because it's all in there. And so the best book in the world is Google. As simple as it might sound, but all the things you want to know, they're on Google. Google how to build a sustainable business. Google how to do Facebook ads, how to have a sustainable clothing brand and so on. And it's almost all written in there. Of course, if at some point you have a list of 20 things and you know these things you have to do, then it might help if you ask someone with experience to tell you on what to focus. But then go back to tip number 3 again, which is asking. And they then might ask you or might tell you what you have to do in that moment. So that's it. These are my five basic tips. And just one more message I would like to give you is, if you really want to do something, you don't need a great idea. Just do it. If you just go out there and do it, remember this, that you're already ahead of 99% of all potential entrepreneurs. And so it's basically just about doing it. And everything else comes in the process and implementation. So thank you very much for your attention.
You have probably heard this buzzword being thrown around in conversations: AI, or artificial intelligence. Sophie Hundertmark, who is a graduate from Hochschule Luzern, was one of the first master students in Switzerland to research chatbots using AI. With her outstanding work, she has won the Best Paper Awards at the IWW Internet Conference 2018 in Portugal. This remarkable lady has founded AI Zurich with the vision of building a community for the exchange of information about AI used in businesses and how they can benefit from it. And now she is a self-employed speaker, author, and consultant for all things chatbots. Let's welcome Sophie Hundertmark with her speech on intelligent chatbots.
Welcome to my first TED Talk about chatbots and artificial intelligence. Well, before I start, do you all know what artificial intelligent chatbots actually are? Maybe not. But then let's ask Einstein, our intelligent assistant. Einstein, what is an AI chatbot?
Artificial intelligence is about making computers act more like humans. All artificial intelligence designs are inspired by the human brain. AI chatbots are software programs infused in your apps or websites. Unlike command-based chatbots, AI chatbots use natural language processing (NLP) to reply. The chatbots get smarter with time as more they answer the questions, more they learn from their past experiences. They need a huge pile of learning data through which they can process. Humans can talk to AI chatbots via written text or speech.
Thank you very much, Einstein. So now I hope you all have an idea about what AI chatbots actually are. But why should you invest in this new technology? Let me show you some examples where AI chatbots are already in use and how they might change the way we do our business. And please keep in mind that the following 4 examples are only 4 examples out of hundreds of examples where AI chatbots are already in use. So the first idea is to save time and money with chatbots in customer service centers. According to a survey led by Salesforce, approximately 65% of all customer service centers already use chatbots in order to answer simple and repeating questions. So while the chatbot can answer to the easy questions, the service agents have now more time in order to solve complex problems and answer difficult questions. And in the end, they will be more efficient and your business can save time and money. The second use case is about generating more qualified leads and higher revenues. So why don't you use a chatbot on your website that asks your website's visitors why they are visiting your page? And depending on their answer, you can send them, or the chatbot can send them suitable content like a white paper and ask for their email address. And of course, your sales team now have more time to contact these qualified leads. And in the end, it will result in higher revenues. The third idea is about creating a better user experience. I guess you all have website visitors who leave your page because they couldn't find what they are looking for. But in using the chatbot technology, you can ask your website visitors what they are looking for. And depending on their answer, the chatbot can guide them to the right location where they will find their answer, and they will be happy. And the last use case I want to show you is about after-hour support. So in times of instant messaging, sharing pictures and videos all the time, everything seems to be just one click away from us. So we expect that businesses answer immediately to our queries. And with chatbots, you can offer a 24-hour customer support. You will decrease the average time of responses, and of course, you will meet your clients' expectations. Now, have I sparked your curiosity in AI chatbots? And now you want to build your own chatbot? Then let me help you. So what do you need? First, you need a use case. What should your intelligent chatbot do for you, for your business, or for your clients? As I showed before, it can be customer service, it can be lead generation. And once you have defined the use case, you need to define the goals and your target group. And then you need data. You need a lot of data. Imagine, how should your intelligent chatbot know how to behave and what to answer? Of course, you need to train it. And that's a bit like training a little child. Do you know how a clever child learns? Okay, then let's ask Einstein again. Einstein, how does a clever child learn?
A clever child observes its parents how they manage individual activities. He tries to record every movement as detailed as possible. And if it feels it has understood how the individual activity works, it tries to copy the individual steps. Maybe he notices that not everything is perfect yet, so he watches his parents again and repeats the process until the result is the same as with its own parents. Imaging the scenario of dressing up. Every morning they see how their mother puts on her clothes, and once they feel confident enough, they do it on their own.
Okay, thank you, Einstein. And now let's transform this to our intelligent chatbots. You need to give them a lot of training data. For instance, if you want to develop a chatbot for customer service, you can train them with emails between customer service agents and clients, or with recordings of phone calls. But please pay attention to misunderstanding and pay attention that you have the right data. Let me tell you a funny story. 2 years ago, I was sitting in a train in Germany, and in Germany, the floors are covered with carpet. So when a young lady, maybe 2 years old, entered the train, she took her shoes off. And her mother was like, "Sorry, what are you doing there?" And the clever child answered, "But mom, look, there is carpet. And we always take our shoes off when there is carpet." So you see the problem? The little girl was trained that when there is carpet, it means that she's sitting at home. So this time she missed that she's sitting in a train. Hopefully next time she will learn that she can only take her shoes off when there is carpet and she's in a fixed house. And with chatbots, you will face the same problems. So you really need to have the right data. So now, I hope you all know what an AI chatbot is. You know why you should use them, and you know how to build them. Then let's have a quick look into the future. I know, we cannot predict the future, but since I'm observing this topic since a long time, I have some interesting ideas for you. The first one is actually quite obvious. The actual chatbots will become a better understanding. So at the moment, there are a lot of chatbots that say they are clever because they have certain algorithms integrated, but when we start talking with them, they only understand little of what we actually want. So here, I'm very sure that the data scientists and developers will improve these kind of chatbots. The second idea is about chatbots starting talking to each other. So imagine once it is not me who's talking to the chatbot of my favorite online shop, but it is my chatbot who's talking to the other chatbot asking where my new dresses are. Well, how would it be? There are already first tests where chatbots started to talk to each other and even abuse each other, so I think we are not so far away from this idea. The third idea I have for you is about personal AI assistants in our ears. So I think you all know these little headphones. What are you doing with them? Making phone calls, listen to music, listen to TED Talks. But what if these headphones become our personal intelligent assistant? Imagine, I'm at a client, it's 11 o'clock, the meeting was scheduled for 1 hour, I'm standing up, going to the exit of the building, and my intelligent assistant says this.
Train by 5 minutes. You can now wait 55 minutes for the next one, but then you will miss your next appointment where I will order a taxi for CHF50. However, your bank account is already in the red zone this month.
Well, maybe she wouldn't let it go so far. Maybe she would have informed me 15 minutes earlier that today I should better finish the meeting 5 minutes earlier in order to catch the right train. But how would that be? And the last idea is about intelligent assistants in our walls at home, in our entire buildings. Imagine we are at home and there's no longer this little black box that answers to the name Alexa, no white box called Google Home Assistant, but the intelligence is integrated in our walls, in our buildings at home. And we can just sit there at the couch asking, how will the weather be? What do I have in my fridge? Or please turn on the washing machine. Half a year ago, I had an interesting conversation with some researchers who are traveling a lot in Asia. And they told me that in Asia, the architects and builders are already thinking about these ideas. So it might be interesting. And now I want to finish my TED talk with some open questions about culture. What do you think? How can we train cultural behavior to a chatbot? Do you think that we will need Asian, European, American, Australian, African chatbots? Or can we say that a chatbot, which is actually a machine, doesn't need to have cultural traits? Think about it. If you want, you can email me your answer, and I hope to see you next time.
Our next speaker is the CEO and co-founder of Bloom Biorenewables. Remy Bouzer and his team has developed and patented a groundbreaking technology that allows energy sourcing from a renewable source, wood. Remy is a chemist by training with more than 5 years of startup experience. He has also advised decision makers on environmental bills and worked in the chemical industry in China. He is passionate about building teams, leveraging technologies, and turning disruptive visions into sustainable businesses that have a global impact. Please welcome Remy Bouzer and his speech about petrochemicals, the dark side of the moon.
So a few years back, I went to visit a friend in the north of Italy. He lives near Alba in the Piedmont, and I absolutely love this region. They not only make one of the best wines in the world, but they also have exquisite food. And so what we do is we go from one restaurant to the other, and one of the dishes that I absolutely love is this pasta with truffle. And I don't know if you ever had this dish, but what happens is you sit at the restaurant, you get a plate with just the pasta on it, and then the waiter comes and has this little tool and actually flakes this truffle onto the dish. And this gives you a smell actually of this mushroom before you can actually eat the pasta, and this combination is absolutely gorgeous. Now, this experience was so strong in my life that I wanted to be able to reproduce it at home. So I told my friend, let's go to the market and buy these truffles. So we get to the village market where there were many stands that would sell them, but there were so many that I was a bit confused and overwhelmed. And on top of it, I didn't have the little tool to do this at home. So I actually found, and on the same market, a stand that sold this olive oil, which actually contains the taste and smell of the truffles. So I thought, great, I take this home. I then cooked for a few weeks at home, and I was very happy until the chemist in me actually told me I should understand how they extract the taste out of truffle and put it into the oil. And there I was shocked, because actually most of these truffle oils are not made from truffle. They actually have petroleum extracts in them. And what shocked me is not so much that you can make petroleum smell or taste good. It's more the fact that how deep these petroleum molecules went in our daily lives, and also how ignorant we are of where they are to be found. So petroleum really has two faces. One is in the spotlight, that is the energy face. It's known by everyone. Everybody has used it once in their lives. You fill it in your car, you know how it smells and all this, and actually you know that it's linked to a CO2 footprint. And this is extremely important, because I believe that it's this understanding of the customer that actually helped the decrease in utilization. So if you look at the projection of the oil use in mobility, you see a major expected decrease through electrification of mobility and alternative fuels. Now, oil also has a more dark side, what I call the dark side of crude, which are these petrochemicals. Here we talk about plastics, we talk about synthetic clothing, we talk about pharmaceutical, inks, paints, things you put on your skin like cosmetics or perfumes. And these products, they also have the same footprint linked to them as the energy does, but people are not really aware of it. And actually this CO2 is also released in the atmosphere, either directly if you think of fertilizers or perfumes, or at the end of life, if you think of plastics and synthetic garments that are mainly burnt when they're not used anymore. So this petrochemical side or dark side of the crude might be the smaller fraction of the global oil usage, but the numbers are still astronomical. So the International Energy Agency has estimated that 13 million barrels of oil go into these materials every day. If you convert this to CO2, that corresponds to 4 million tons of CO2 that is potentially released every day into the atmosphere. Now the story gets even worse, because we don't see any reduction in the consumption, and actually we expect this consumption to increase by 7 million barrels of oil additional to what we consume today by 2050. Now this 2050 is an interesting date, because on the political side, this is the date where a lot of countries claim to reach carbon neutrality. Carbon neutrality is actually when a country is not emitting any CO2 anymore. Switzerland has clearly stated this in August last year, that this is the target. The European Union has a number of tools in place, like the Green Deal, that are aiming towards this 2050 target. And just last December, Ursula von der Leyen said that it's the man on the moon moment for Europe. Now, this is not only happening in politics, but also in the industry. Here I took two examples of big fragrance and flavor groups that have internal programs to completely remove the fossil carbons from their products. Now, we have a clear dilemma here. On one hand, you have actually an expected increase in the consumption of oil for materials, and on the other hand, you have clear targets to become completely neutral. So how to bring these two things together? Well, the good news is science has a few alternatives or a few options to do that. Let me guide you through them. So there are three main options that we can go for. The first one is what I call swipe it under the carpet. So basically, society continues to use oil, but we develop technologies that can capture the CO2 from the atmosphere, and we literally pump it into the ground. I tried to do this with dust at my place. Well, I can tell you it didn't work for very long. Another option that would also be based on continuing consuming petroleum is reborn from ashes, so meaning that you use the petroleum, you capture again the CO2 from the atmosphere, but instead of putting it under your carpet, you actually upgrade it to similar molecules that you had in the original petroleum. This would allow you to close the loop, but the problem there is you need a lot of energy, and the even bigger problem is that a lot of that technology is far from being developed enough to meet the timeline. And the third option is what I call plant a tree. This is actually completely moving away from petroleum and using biomass as a source for these materials. The benefit of using biomass is that trees are actually capturing CO2 by a so-called photosynthesis mechanism to build their own core. So if you use wood, you basically include in a larger circle that is already existing and that trees are using every day. Now the question is, how are you going to convert a tree into petroleum? Well, trees and petroleum have actually a common past. Most people think that petroleum is liquefied dinosaurs, which is not completely wrong, but as there are much more trees than dinosaurs, oil or crude oil is most probably mainly made out of old trees. So a tree is made out of three main components. It's cellulose and hemicellulose fibers, and they are really glued together by a so-called lignin polymer. Now, this material got trapped millions of years back into the ground, and what happened is it really decomposed into the liquid we know as petroleum today. And the petrochemical industry now is extracting this from the ground, separating the different components, and selling them on the market. Now, what I want to show you here is really that different molecules have also different price on the market, and this is a way for the petroleum industry to actually subsidize the different fractions. Now, if you look at what happens with wood, well, the paper industry today is actually converting millions of tons of wood into mainly one single fraction, that is cellulose. What happens to the two other fractions is that because it's so difficult to break this matrix apart, they happen to actually agglomerate or condense, as we say in the chemical world. Now, these condensed materials are very hard to break apart and limit basically the ability to use wood for a number of products that are made out of petroleum today. So the person that will manage to actually open up these molecules, or even better prevent these condensation or agglomeration to happen, will really open up the possibilities or the abilities of society to valorize wood. And I'm here today because my peers at EPFL, together with my team with whom I co-founded a startup, actually exactly developed this. So we have a chemistry now that is able to prevent the agglomeration of these materials, and we can nicely extract petrosimilars from wood. Now the path forward is really to implement this. So the science is here, the politics has really set the direction and the time frame, and now we need the support of the economy to take action and also responsibility. And the purpose of this all is really to prevent the CO2 to be hidden everywhere, including in the truffle oil that you put on your pasta. Thank you for your attention.
What will tourism look like after the borders reopen? Will people dare to travel once more? Or will the online experience replace the traditional guided tour? The answer to these questions cannot be known for sure. However, what we do know is that new trends are developing. We are interacting differently, reassessing our values, and beginning to value quality over quantity. Our next speaker is an authorized tourist guide in Stockholm and the author of many articles about that city. Currently, she has a massive number of followers on Instagram and YouTube. The question on everyone's mind is, will slow travel soon become a reality? Our next speaker dares to answer this very question. Please welcome Ira Stomberg.
Last Wednesday, I cried. I sat on a bench by the water in Stockholm and cried. I'm 38, but I felt like 13. People came up to me to ask what had happened, but I couldn't really reply. I couldn't explain. I was happy and extremely confused. I was lost, excited, ecstatic, and very sad all at once. I had just had 5,000 people on my online guided tour, and that after weeks of cancellations and despair. I tried to imagine this crowd all standing, listening to me. Wow, I wonder what people on the streets thought I was doing. Walking with my phone, showing the city to a couple of friends? Or maybe they just thought I was crazy. Who am I? I'm a guide, a freelance tour guide. That crazy person that walks outdoors, sun or rain, tells people stories. My job is 95% dependent on tourism and open borders. In March 2020, the borders were closed. And I was in complete disbelief. I was paralyzed and shocked, overwhelmed by negativity, scrolling the news all days long. My life, my job, everything depends on people traveling, and now they stopped. Am I unemployed now? Will I get depressed? Should I go and start looking for a different job in a different industry? Will people ever travel again? But I actually was crying because I felt that happiness high when I get to do what I love most, talking about Stockholm. I was deprived of it for weeks now, and then I decided to fight. I took my job that I already have and decided to go creative and make it more flexible and adapt it to the new world. I started investing time in my blog, and I thought constantly about my audience. What do they want now? All those people that are used to traveling and now they're staying at home. Would they appreciate an online guided experience? And that's how I started walking on the streets of Stockholm and streaming my stories. The tours are free to join, and I got a lot of engagement and support. All right, I thought, is this how my job will look like from now on? The feedback from my online tours was amazing. Hundreds of people were watching, many wanted to pay. I got encouraging comments, empowering replies. A whole new world was opening up for me and a whole new audience. A lot of people that would never think of traveling to Sweden were joining my online tours. Why have I never thought about this before? Did you know that internet access is more common than owning a passport. There are so many people that will never travel, but now they can book a safari boat ride online in Africa. And all those physical disabilities that would normally prevent you from traveling are completely irrelevant. You can book a bike tour online with a broken leg. There are a lot of advantages with online tours. It's cheap, no travel costs, it's accessible from your sofa, it's time-saving. And often you get to see things that you wouldn't see otherwise. Museums are streaming from their conservation labs and other spaces that are not accessible to the public. On my online tours, we go to some courtyards where groups are not allowed. Is this how people will travel from now on? I mean, Airbnb has started with online experiences. Will people get back to the regular travel? Will they travel as they did before, when the borders reopen? Is this online trend just a trend, or is it a new and booming industry? I believe the latter. I believe that the online trend will grow even stronger after the borders reopen. But it's in no way a substitute for real travel. When I guide online, I feel that a lot is missing. You don't smell the coffee, you don't feel the smell of cinnamon, you don't feel the Nordic wind on your cheeks, you can't feed the seagulls. You only use your eyes, partly your ears. What about the rest of your senses? Online tours are indeed a new and booming industry, but it's not a replacement for real-life travel, rather a complement. When you plan your real travel online, you book several online experiences and then you decide which destination you want to go and research deeper. You book different online tours and then you choose your private guide based on which one you liked more. You book a mountain hiking online tour and then you feel that you want to have even more of it. So the online experience takes your research on a whole new level. So the online is a great starter, but it's not a main course. Travel is a story. We are human beings. We want to connect, to feel the community, to experience new settings. Therefore, I believe we will continue to travel. Maybe not as frequent as we did before, but nothing can stop a human being from being curious, from wanting to see the world with his own eyes. So I believe that this online experience will change our attitude to the real travel, and hopefully we will opt for slow travel. Now, the slow travel concept is not new. We're talking about it for a decade now. Fast travel, when you have short time, a city and the checklist of must-sees, a quick and shallow visit. Slow travel is a much more mindful and deep immersion into a city, a country, a culture. Just like with fast food, everyone knows what it is. Quick, cheap, often tasteless. Slow food, on the other hand, is when you cook from scratch, share the meal with your loved ones, savor every beat, enjoy every moment. A slow traveler will probably take more time to explore the city. He or she will not rush to the next museum just because the guidebook told them so. Do they have to go to that museum? Maybe they just want to go through the park instead of following this checklist of the must-sees. Maybe they just want to hang out with the locals or sit in a cafe off the beaten track all day long. A slow traveler listens to himself, chooses his own experience, absorbs. He probably chooses quality over quantity. Slow travel takes us back to the roots of why we travel, embrace new community, new experiences, new acquaintances. So the online tourism is here to stay. The real life travel goes nowhere. It will be boosted by the online. And am I crazy to believe that it hopefully will become more meaningful and deep? I also noticed that a lot of locals started showing up for my online tours, and the feedback I get is that they would never think of traveling, touristing in their own city if not for my online tours. They add that they wait for this corona time to be over so they can join my real life tours. Do you see what's happening? A whole new audience is showing itself. Locals are more and more interested in destinations close to their homes. Partly it's boosted by the pandemic, as most of us will spend this summer in our country. But the online experience gives them options, exposes them to new ideas, and gives this so needed boost for their local tourism. We are changing our view on travel. These three trends, the online, slow travel, local tourism, and nothing new. We're talking about flying less, traveling more meaningful for like a decade now. Video blogs from different countries were there for like 20 years. And most of the countries have some kind of local tourism. But this shift is happening more rapidly now, partly catalyzed by the pandemic and by new technologies. We're getting this push to reassess our values. And it's too early to see the actual outcome, but I have this strong belief that we are moving in this positive direction of sustainable travel. A win-win for us, for the planet, and for the world's economy. Am I crazy?
Our next speaker resides halfway across the world in the bustling country of Singapore. Michael Vaz currently serves as Vice President of Learning and Development for Accor Hotels. He also served in global, regional, and corporate leadership roles across various companies such as Starwood, Fairmont, and Emaar. Michael and his wife have 3 energetic kids together, and for certain, Michael has been an inspiring nominee for Super Dad and Husband of the Year. His speech today will be about how you can understand your belief system in the context of leadership and how to lead in times of change and uncertainty. Please give a warm welcome to Michael Vaz with his speech, #CheckYourBS.
Of many memories that I have as a leadership speaker, I remember this one extremely vividly. I was standing next to this very senior leader of a very large organization, a leader of incredible influence. He was doing amazing things, living his career dreams, the 5-bedroom house, the car, the wife, the family, the business class flights, all the apparent ducks in a row. But this was a moment like no other. In fact, not much prepares you for a moment like this. I stood with him, my hand on his shoulder, and he had begun to cry. Real tears rolling off his cheek and onto the floor. I tried to imagine, was this a physical pain? He'd actually told me about a severe back pain that he was in, probably a result of all those flights. Were they tears of exhaustion, where you juggle a work life, a home life, and try to maintain balance, and all the other stress that comes with life? Were they tears of regret, perhaps of spending 300 days a year on a flight or in a hotel room, away from your family? I'm going to hit pause on that story and come back to it, but here's the question I have for you today. Have you ever experienced a moment like that? A moment where you were in pain, physical pain, emotional pain. Maybe you've had someone in your life experience pain like that. A moment that reminds us that we're all truly human. For context, to anyone watching this today, it is May 2020, and today we live in a world that constantly reminds us just how truly human we are, how things can be so out of our control. We live in a world in which we've had to throw away every crisis manual ever written and begin to think about new ones. Some of us have started questioning the way we live our lives and have begun to think about new ones. And I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thrown away all my TEDx topics and notes and begun to think about a new one over the last few weeks. Today, I want to bring you something very real, something that applies to you where you're watching this and in any season of life that you're in. If you're somebody looking for their first job, somebody leading their organization, someone leading their family, this one's for you. What I hope to share with you today is something that has the power to start making real changes and positive, tangible changes in your life if you'll start where you're at and right now. I call it check your BS. Now, for context, I want to just take a moment and say this is not me trying to be rude. Let's get that out of the way. Today, whenever I say the words BS, I want you to think of two new words, your belief systems. So what is a belief system? At its simplest, it's what you've allowed yourself to believe about yourself. Shall we say that again? It's what you've allowed yourself to believe about yourself. Where do these belief systems come from? They come from just living life. They come from the people you surround yourself with when you were growing up, your parents, your grandparents, your teachers, your schoolmates, your peers, your squad today, your tribe, your closest friends. They also come from what you think, see, hear, and say. Neuroscience teaches us that every time we have a thought about anything new, whether we're having a conversation, reading something, listening to something, or even watching this talk, our brain starts to create a neural pathway. In fact, right now, your brains are forming millions of little pathways even in this moment. How powerful is that? Studies show that every time we think these thoughts again and dwell on the same thoughts again and again, we allow ourselves to make these pathways even stronger and stronger until one day they become what we call deep-seated or deep-rooted beliefs, or as I like to call them, our very own personal BS. What's even crazier is our belief systems go with us everywhere, whether we're at work, in a meeting, even into a new relationship, or even if you're just stuck or isolated at home. And they start to impact our emotions, our decisions, and our behavior every single day. And because of the decisions we make and the way we behave, they either bring us failure or success in any area of our life. What I'm about to share with you is 3 simple truths that have resonated with people from all walks of life across every leadership program I've ever delivered. They're results of studies, experiments, research within these programs, and I'm confident that the more you think about these, they're going to help you build some amazing new neural pathways and better belief systems that will radically change your life for the better. And what kind of training guy would I be if I didn't give you some very practical tips on how to build great BS in your life? Let's dive right in. Number 1, start with the heart. Every leadership program we've ever run starts with self. Self-discovery, leading self, knowing yourself, and there's a very good reason for that. See, every human being on the planet wants to know, why am I here today? Why have I been put on this earth? Why was I born? What's my purpose? Perhaps you've had a moment that makes you wonder, why am I alive today? It's certainly a question a lot of people are asking themselves. The question I have for you today is, do you believe that you were created for a purpose? That you were born a champion? See, when I talk like that in a training room, 90% of the time that's met with an eye roll. In fact, I wonder if you rolled your eyes at me just now. Maybe a little hint to your BS. Let me plant a new neural pathway for you today. What if I were to prove it to you using a very quick impromptu biology lesson that you were born a champion? Are you ready? Here goes. Every single one of you watching this ran a race before you were even born. In fact, there were hundreds of others competing in this race. And not only did you win, you were the only survivor. I'm not going to repeat that, but I want you to do a little biology check, or maybe call mom if you need to, or Google it, right? See, most people, even young men and women I train today, have allowed themselves to forget this foundational, powerful belief. You were born a champion. You were born a survivor. You were born a winner. I promise you some very practical tips from a training room, so here goes. If you ever want more proof that you were created a winner with a set of special gifts and abilities that make you uniquely you, go take a StrengthsFinder assessment. There are many, many different assessments in the world today, And out of all of them, a strengths-based assessment is an awesome one to help you reset your BS. Not only does it reveal to you your top strengths, it reveals a very powerful fact. Research from these assessments tell us that the strengths we're born with, hear me out, the strengths we're born with or created with are so unique to you that the odds of finding someone else on the planet with the same strengths as you are 1 in 33 million. I like those odds. So not only are you born a champion, you were given a set of unique strengths, gifts, and abilities to make a real impact in this world. So get up and check your BS and check your belief systems. Number 2, the focus and the feed. 3 parts of our body that are constantly feeding our BS every day are our eyes, our ears, and our mouth. These guys were really onto something. So let's talk about what you've been taking in. Your feed. Whose feed have you been following? What was the last book you read? And did it speak to you, the unique you, the one with unique gifts and abilities? See, I truly believe that not all books are written to benefit you. How could they be? You've been created with your own unique strengths, gifts, and abilities to fulfill your own purpose. The same goes with a TV show or inspirational talks that we feed ourselves with. How do you decide what's right for you to watch? See, our emotions are great little indicators for us to feeding ourselves with the right content that fuels our BS. I have this golden rule, and you've heard of this extremely potent and valid emotion added into our dictionaries recently, right? FOMO. Well, today I want to introduce you to a new one. It's real. It's FOLO, #FOLO, the fear of living once. And that should scare us all just a little bit. What I mean here is life's too short to read the wrong books. So guess what? If you're not enjoying a book you've just been recommended, in the first 5 pages, put it down and start another one. There's plenty out there. If a TV show that you're watching is producing harmful emotions, stress, anxiety, maybe don't binge watch 6 hours of it just because your friends recommended it. Listen closely to what your emotions tell you and begin to filter your feed. Another great little tip I have for you is switch off CNN. And in the spirit of renaming stuff, CNN is constant negative news. Now this can be the real news. God knows the news is a source of constant negativity. In fact, show me a channel on the planet that tells me 100,000 planes landed successfully today, or starts by reporting the numbers of people healed from a virus. News is designed to get you to watch it repeatedly, and that's what we often do. And if we're not careful, it feeds our belief systems. So if you want to stay informed, watch the headlines and then stop. During the time of the Chicago shootings in America a few years ago, studies showed that some people actually suffered PTSD just by watching scenes played out repeatedly on the news. Did you get that? Can we take a moment to repeat that? People were suffering from actual post-traumatic stress disorder just from watching the news. My wife's aunt, who's a doctor in the States, told me that she has friends in New York today suffering those exact symptoms just from watching the news or watching all the death that's been published on the news. So what are you seeing? What are you allowing into your BS? What's your focus? What's your feed? There are good things we can dwell on in the world today. Trainer tip: the most successful leaders in the world talk about building their BS daily. 20 minutes to 45 minutes a day, feeding on good things, podcasts, YouTube videos, but content that makes them smile, makes them laugh. Spending time in prayer, meditation, and that's revolutionized the way they live their lives. #FOLO, fear of living once. Can you spare 20 minutes of your day to building your BS by focusing on beautiful things, excellent things, things that are lovely, things that are admirable? What this does is it feeds your emotions. And this is important because 90% of the decisions you make and the way we behave comes from our emotions. Last trainer tip before I move on. Most organizations out there and most science in the world starts to recommend every one of us needs a mentor. Here's a new one to feed your BS. Why not find several mentors? See, not one person is good at everything, but find one for your finances that you want to create. Find one who's got the job you aspire to be in. Find one who's great at relationships. Find one who's great for your spiritual life. How's that for checking your BS? Number 3, your words and your world. IKEA conducted this fantastic experiment in 2018. They took 2 sets of plants and installed them across a number of schools in the UAE. and they invited children to speak life over one plant and speak death over the other. So every day, children would come up and speak words of encouragement, affirmation to one, and almost bully the second one, speaking words of harm over them. They would say to one, you're going to grow, you're going to be green, you're going to prosper, you're going to be lovely, you're going to bear fruit. And the other one, they would say, you will die, you will not produce fruit, you will shrivel up and die. Now these two plants were given the same amount of water and air and the same perfect conditions. And after a 30-day period, one blossoms and the other shrivels up and dies. One of the most incredible proverbs puts it like this: life and death are in the power of the tongue. Let's say that again. Both life and death are in the power of the tongue. And you get the results from what you speak. So what are you saying to the people around you, to the people you lead, to the people you love? Are you building them up or tearing them down? What are you saying about yourself to yourself? Tons of our leaders resonated with the fact that the greatest lie we can ever tell ourselves is, that's just who I am. In fact, have you ever caught yourself saying that sentence to someone close to you, perhaps a friend or a loved one or your spouse? The most self-limiting thing you can ever say about yourself to yourself is, that's just who I am. Because every time you say it, your brain creates a stronger neural pathway. And out of that pathway comes emotions, decisions, and behavior about ever getting better in life. Saying that's just who I am makes your brain create new BS, that there's no reason to get better. And it starts to build resistance to learning or growing or success. In other words, you just stopped yourself from being a better leader, a better father, a better friend, a better spouse, a better mom, just by saying these words. What I wish for you today is that you'll seriously start to watch your language and start speaking life over yourself and the people around you. Okay, whatever happened to the leader in the story I started with? I'm happy to report he's doing a lot better. In that moment, I reached out into a core belief system of my own, and I said a prayer for him. See, in research conducted with some of the most successful leaders of all time, almost all of them point to the fact that there is a bigger reason for their success, and it came from a foundational belief in God, in a higher power, in the power of love, a good partner or spouse who stood by them no matter what. See, as much as we focus on ourselves and try to be better and build better BS, we need to realize that we're not the be-all and end-all, that we're put here to serve and help others, whether it's our business, whether it's our families. In fact, of all the leadership models in existence today, servant leadership is still ranked #1. In every training program, when I ask people to think about the best leaders they've ever worked with, the answers are always the same. They cared about me. They gave me their time. They listened. They built me up. All the words that describe true servant leadership. When we're given a leadership title, it's so we can serve our people and our teams. When we're blessed with a wife and kids, it's so we can serve them and raise them up. You don't just have one calling, you have several. How's that for a new BS or a new belief system? Just remember, you can't be of help unless you feed yourself first. It's like the flight attendant who at the beginning of every briefing says, in the event of an emergency, masks will drop from the ceiling. Just remember to put yours on first so you can save others around you. Start with your heart. Check your focus and your feed. Change your words and your world, and you just might end up becoming your BS, your best self. Thank you, and God bless you.
Now we are going to have a little break. There will be a Q&A session with the previous speakers. This is your time to ask your questions. So, welcome to our live chat where you can ask questions and I will pass them on to the speakers over here. So we have Nicholas, we have Michael, and we have Sophie, Hundertmark. Hello. Okay, so the first question for you, okay, for Nicholas, we have a question from Katerina. She said, I really enjoyed listening to your story. Did you always know that you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
Thank you for the question. I didn't always know. I think when I was a kid, I wanted to become a pilot, actually, kind of a cliche thing. But then when I was like 14, 15, I liked to actually sell stuff online. And somehow I wanted to create my own thing. So when I was 17, In a high school project, I sold hand sanitizers during the swine flu period. It worked obviously well, and that's something really motivated me to do more things. And then I also want to do something, but I was always not sure until I saw that the French imported some products from India. Then I realized, okay, if she can do it, I can also do it, and then it actually all started.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. Okay, so now the next question is for you, Sophie. A question from Katerina. She's asking, could you please share tools or platforms where the AI chatbots can be developed? Hello, Sophie? Okay, so no answer from Sophie. I'm just going to read the next question for Nicholas. Okay, so Katerina has mentioned, as it was mentioned, you have started your business with only 5,000 Swiss francs. Could you please share how did you create and implement an e-commerce platform at the beginning?
Well, that's actually super simple. There's tons of platforms out there where you can create an online store without any knowledge. And we started with...
Hello? So, Katerina has mentioned...
Hello? Hi,
As it
we can hear
was
you.
mentioned, you have started your business with only 5,000 Swiss francs. Could you please share how did you create and implement an e-commerce...
I think someone has the speaker on and...
Yes, I think there's something wrong with the speaker. Okay, so if you could answer that, Nicholas, is that okay?
Sure. As I mentioned, like it's super simple. I mean, you can start with platforms that only cost you $100 a year, and you don't need to have any knowledge. And then at some point, when you need a bigger store, you can just switch up to other platforms. So we started with Gmbh, which is super basic, and it was $100 a year and didn't need any skills.
Okay.
However, good skills would be a little bit of HTML, but it's not really necessary, but it would help you along the way.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. So Ira, I see that you've joined us already. I have a question for you from Sabina. Yes, if you could hear me. The question is, Ira, could you give an advice for somebody who would love to try online guided tours in their hometown?
For someone who'd love to guide a guided tour, or someone who would love to join a guided tour?
So the question is, if you could give an advice for someone who would love to try online guided tours in their hometown.
Well, I think they mean to join someone else's.
Yes.
Well, the advice is just to look, to Google, to go on the social media and ask for guides, because many guides are over there on social media, and ask them if anyone does online guided tours. Most of them don't, and if you have the technology and the skills, you can help them maybe.
Okay.
And if you're a guide, just go and do it. And social media is the key here, because that's where you create your audience.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So I have a question for Michael. This question is from Katerina. She says, thanks for that truly insightful talk. I also believe that we need to carefully select the media we consume. Is there any podcast or book you absolutely recommend listening to or reading?
I'm very biased in the stuff I let in. As you can see, I'm very passionate about what I speak about. So I'm very careful of what I let in, which includes, like I said, everything that I put on that talk is stuff that I believe in. So it's really heartfelt. I'd say, look, for me, in terms of books, the Book of Proverbs is massive, as you could see reflected through my talks. I even have a book of that on my desk and in my office space. Because I look at that almost, every day or every next day. I'm always looking at that because it's inspirational for business, it's inspirational for family life. So I never let that out of my sight. Okay. Also, I've some of the classics, like Start with Why by Simon Sinek. The podcasts I listen to are very unique, though. I listen to a lot of great guys, people that you wouldn't normally, so it's not. I don't want to say it's not the Tony Robbins of the world, but it's people like Craig Groeschel from the Global Leadership Network. It's Stephen Furtick. It's it's people like that really inspire and that feed my emotions for the day. a topic that I recommended and something that I do every day is spend about 40 minutes or 45 minutes a day literally just working out and at the same time listening
To a
to
podcast.
people like this that just spark great emotions for the day.
Okay. Okay, that's great. A great answer from you. And if I could ask if Sophie is here with us.
Yes, hello.
Oh, hi, Sophie. So I will pass on the question to you. Hold on if I can find the question. Okay. Okay, so the question from Katerina, she is asking, what is the most fascinating characteristics about chatbots for you?
I think one of the most fascinating characteristics is that they can start building a relationship with the user. So they can interact with the user and help that it stays on the website and starts to interact with it. And yeah, that's one of the most important or most interesting things for me.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. So can I ask if Remy is also here with us? I have a question for you.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, hi. So a question for you. Do you believe that carbon neutrality would happen by 2050? Or it would take longer than 30 plus years to reduce carbon emission to zero?
Yeah, so it is certainly a very tight target, but if the science is taking off, it should be fine. I'm sorry, I have a problem here. So I think we are on the right track. We need really to engage science as much as we can, and also take the responsibility from the actors, meaning the corporates and especially the consumers need to kind of understand the carbon cycles and adapt their behavior to reach them. But I'm very confident that by 2050 we'll manage to reach carbon neutrality.
Okay, thank you so much. Nicholas, a question for you. Okay, wait, hold on. So the question is, I really enjoyed hearing about your story. Did you always know that you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, should I just answer it again, the question?
Okay, so that question, I had already asked that question for you. So a question for Michael. Okay. I'm looking for a question for Michael. Okay, so no more questions for you, Michael, actually. So I'm going to pass it on. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to Michael Vaz. Where are you? Yes, here you are. So a question from OBM. How do you incorporate your own BS in your leadership principles?
Well, I have to be pretty objective when I'm talking to leaders. See, I believe one idea, just like these TED Talks, one idea can change your life. It doesn't matter if you hear it in a 10-second talk or you hear it in a 10-second video clip sometimes. It just changes the way you think, you feel. And if it can shift something that's been in there a long time, that's great. So I just go in with that humility every time of, if I can get them to take away 3 little things, and that's fine. I have to be very careful not to impose on them, but if I can just, if they ask, it's you with a spirit of humility, just kind of say, okay, would you like to hear my opinion, and then share that with them. So I hope that's the right answer. It's never about imposing it, but it's about letting them have, and shift their beliefs, giving them those ideas, just like we've been doing this whole evening.
Okay, thank you so much. Remy, the next question is for you. Okay, so
sure.
This question is from Katerina. She says that definitely an important topic. In your eyes, how realistic is that we reach carbon neutrality by 2050? If you had the power to change something within politics, what would it be?
Yeah, so I hope, as I said before, that we will reach it. And I think what we need to do is be more clear on what is the history of the objects you use. Because in my opinion, the problem is really the awareness of the consumer, that it's very difficult today to understand where the carbon comes from and where does it go afterwards, even though you have the feeling you are, recycling and doing things right. It's sometimes very difficult to understand, and labels, for instance, would help a lot. So we need to develop from the political side ways of organizing and informing the population.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is going to be for Ira. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, hello. The question is, I love the idea of slow traveling. Stockholm is a great, and its various museums, especially the ABBA and the Fotografiska Museum, they are amazing.
Right.
And what is your favorite place in Stockholm?
Wow, that's a great question because it changes all the time. Apart from, my bakery stays the same for like the last 3 years. I love Swedish pastry. But if we talk about culture and the galleries, then I think my favorite is the Thielska Galleriet, the Gallery of Thiel.
Okay.
And it's not very far from ABBA Museum. And it's just a great art gallery with a great cafe, which is important in my eyes, and in a beautiful place with amazing nature. And it's on the island and a lot of water around it. I love it. It's very Stockholmish.
Okay, I haven't been there, so maybe one day after the coronavirus is over, maybe I'll visit Stockholm. Okay, so
you see,
the final.
It's not enough with online.
Okay, so the final question for Michael Vaz. Vaz, I love how #CheckYourBS can be applied to all aspects of life. How have you checked your BS?
I do it every day. But like you said, it's context for anything. You can check your BS on any subject. So I'll give you a very easy example. When I'm talking to my children, for instance, and that can be a real test of checking your BS, because kids want to do things their own way. The next generation and the next generation want to do things their own way. And sometimes it's that fine balance of, do I correct them? Do I teach them? Or do I let them discover it? Or can I look at things from a brand new perspective? So that's constant, and any area of life will push you into checking your BS. Just look and see whether you're getting the results you want. That's what I tell people. Look at any of your area of your life, and if you're not getting the results, go back and reset some BS.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
so that is the final question. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Now let's go back to the live session. Welcome back to our second session of the Hochschule Luzern TEDx digital event. Now, on to our next speaker. Lionel Delberg has been working for 9 years in his profession. He launched his career with trainings in Zurich and Paris before professionalizing his skills. Lionel has been touring the Swiss cantons with his 5226 project. He has made appearances on TV and even wrote a book. He is currently sharing his tips and tricks on everyday life online. Tune in with our next speaker, Lionel Delberg, with his speech about the enjoyment of negative emotions.
Hi. When I'm standing in front of people, I always get reactions like these. People are very confused by what I do. They experience a lot of negative emotions, and of course they react accordingly. And the reason for this, because in my profession I mix illusion and reality. But the huge paradox is, the more negative emotions they experience, the better they like it. And the better they're going to remember it. And that's one of the key values of magic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the art of magic is designed to elicit negative emotions, such as confusion, bafflement, and from time to time also loss of control. I would even say, without negative emotions, there would be no magic. Because in order to make impossible things seem to be possible, I need to break with the ordinary. I need to lie on you. I need to come up with fake news or at least alternative facts. And of course, all this provokes negative emotions. But the question it raises, are negative emotions always negative? And if not, under which circumstances are they may enjoyable? I think above all in the current situation, the corona crisis, it's an interesting point to look at. In my opinion, there are two main benefits of negative emotions. First and foremost, negative emotions are extremely memorable. They are burned in our memory. And second, people not only like, no, they love negative emotions as long as the environment is safe. Let me start by sharing with you why negative emotions are so memorable. We all know and may marvel that the stories we tell over and over again tend to focus on what went wrong in our lives, on our holidays, in our childhood. There's so many bad experiences, but most of them make up for a very good memory. I, for example, still remember very well that we were held in the basement of a club in Istanbul, and that's almost 20 years ago. Some strange guys wanted us to buy our way out. And I'm quite sure that you're familiar with the phrase, Houston, we have a problem. Well, Apollo 13 was not a particularly successful mission, but Apollo 13 elicited a lot of negative emotion and it's therefore burned in our memory. And the secret to this lies in our brain, because our brain handles positive and negative information differently. Professor Baumeister from the University of Queensland says, bad impressions and bad stereotypes are quicker to form and more resistant to disconfirmation than good ones. So we recall so-called bad memories more easily and in greater detail. And that, of course, is also one of the reasons why we remember magic tricks from time to time, still after years or even decades. Let's move to the second point, the seeming paradox, the enjoyment of negative emotions. But how is this possible? Let me come back to my Istanbul story and also Apollo 13. Looking back, there are kind of cool memories. And the reason for this is that nothing serious happened. And it's also the key condition for the enjoyment of negative emotions. Well, we love to experience bafflement, confusion, and also loss of control as long as the environment is safe. Our caveman brain delights if something challenges the laws of nature and nobody gets hurt and the earth keeps spinning. That's also one of the reasons why quite a few of you enjoy watching horror movies, because we love those fears, as long as they are harmless and non-threatening. Hence, you probably agree with me that most of us don't like to be fooled, but the majority of us are also enjoying a good magic trick. In the field of magic, there's something else that comes into play. People seem to be happy if they're unhappy, and they seem to be unhappy if they're happy in the context of magic tricks. Confusing? Well, let me explain. If I reveal a magic trick, meaning if I tell people for real how it's done, most of the time people are disappointed, mainly because of two reasons. First of all, they think it must have been clever, it actually is in their opinion. And second, and more important, they lose the sense of wonder. Because although a vast majority of us does not believe in real magic powers, we watch to believe that impossible things could be true. Because that's not only more fun, No, it keeps alive our sense of wonder and astonishment. But today is a kind of a special day. And for me, it's also kind of a special place. And because of this, I'm going to reel a trick. I'm going to show you a trick, so you will have something cool to show your friends, and also you will hopefully experience those feelings. And it was one of the first tricks I've learned when I was like about 8 years old, more or less. Oh, all you need is a handkerchief. And you start by putting the handkerchief in your hand. You just stuff the handkerchief all the way in. It gets smaller before it vanishes completely. You blow on it, and it transforms into an egg. And well, the handkerchief? Well, no, it's not gone, but it traveled all the way into my pocket. Well, the trick looks quite good from your side. It doesn't look as good from my side. When I turn around, it's easy to spot. It's a hollow egg, and I just stuffed the handkerchief in. Now, please be honest. You thought that is something clever. So all you need, it's a hollow egg. Of course, please take the content out. And one handkerchief and a second handkerchief. The two handkerchiefs, preferably the same color. So you start with one handkerchief in the left-hand pocket, then you put the egg in your right-hand pocket and the handkerchief on top. You stand in front of the audience, you take a deep breath, and you reach into your pocket to get the handkerchief. Here we go. Well, that's also half of it. Of course, you also take out the egg, hidden in your palm. In magic, that's called palming. Now, you wave over your hand like this, and then you drop the egg from one hand into the other. So you transfer the egg from here to there. And then you start by putting the handkerchief into the egg. You just put it in, push it down like this. From behind it looks like this. Continue. Of course, it gets smaller. What is good? And you put it all the way in. You just stuff it all the way down. In magic, it's called stuffing the handkerchief into the egg. You blow on it, and here is the egg. And you reach into the pocket, and you show people that the handkerchief has traveled all the way to your pocket. You take a bow, you take the applause, and you're done. Well, of course, never show the egg from the other side. Easy as that. That's it for the trick. But wait, that's not it for my talk. Because, of course, I don't want you to fool people. No, that's not my goal. But please bear in mind, our caveman brain delights if something challenges the laws of nature and provokes negative emotion, such as confusion. Because people not only like, no, they love to experience negative emotions as long as the environment is safe. And that's sure as X is X.
The next talk will be about a topic that has been trending, climate change. Maya Rosen is the idea behind the campaign Flight Free 2019 and 2020. She is the co-founder of the organization We Stay on the Ground. Although we are in a climate emergency, many of us keep flying to go on holiday. Why is that? And does staying on the ground really make a difference? Maya Rosen used to be a big fan of low-cost airlines, but has stayed on the ground for over a decade. She leads by example and encourages people to change their flying behavior. Today, her goal is to convince you to do the same. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Maya Rosen and her speech on why we need to stay on the ground.
If someone had told me a year ago that global air traffic would be halved in 2020, I would have jumped for joy. During the past few years, I've spent all my time campaigning for people to stay on the ground. This has now become a reality, but for the wrong reason. The corona pandemic isn't something to be happy about, and people not flying for a few months won't save the climate. But it is great to see that quick and radical change is possible. The pandemic has shown us that politicians can make uncomfortable decisions and that people are prepared to make big sacrifices. So why haven't we done the same for the climate? In the past couple of years, I've talked about the climate crisis with lots of people, and one of the most important things I've learned is that most people don't know how severe the situation is. Although many are worried, few people have realized that the next decade is crucial. If we don't halve global emissions in this time, we risk reaching the point of no return. It's not surprising so few have accepted this fact. Despite all the warnings, the world keeps on spinning. Our politicians continue to ignore the science, and in the media, news about the climate sits next to articles about cheap holiday flights. And when everyone else continues to live their lives as usual, it can't be that bad, can it? The thing about human nature is that we are greatly affected by each other. The reason so many of us continue to fly on holiday even though we're in a climate emergency is not because we don't care, but because we are human. We are more influenced by others' behavior than gloomy climate predictions. So if everyone around us continues to fly, then so do we. And when we hear facts that go against our values and lifestyles, we become defensive and find arguments to continue living as usual. And there are so many good arguments to keep flying. Aviation plays an important role in our globalized society. It smoothly takes us across the globe, enables meetings with people from all over the world, and brings different cultures together. And besides, it's so much fun. Shouldn't we deal with all the things that are worse instead? After all, aviation accounts for just a few % of global emissions. But the reason that aviation emissions aren't higher is because very few people in the world are privileged enough to fly. It's been estimated that 80% of the world population has never been on a plane. For those who fly, air travel is often the single largest source of emissions. Just one holiday flight can use up your entire annual carbon budget and more. For example, we Swedes love to travel to Thailand. A return trip there emits 3 tons of greenhouse gases. This leaves no room for the things we can't live without, like food and a home. If everyone in the world took a similar flight once a year, total global emissions would rise by over 40% when we desperately need to reduce them. In other words, the only reason emissions from flying aren't higher is because there is so much inequality in the world. If everyone could afford to fly on holiday, we wouldn't stand a chance of solving the climate emergency. An even greater injustice is that it's the people who haven't contributed to the climate crisis who are already suffering from its consequences. It is them, not us, who are forced to flee their homes or see their children starve. The problem is that we can't directly see the consequences of our emissions. If someone told you that your emissions would directly lead to the death of another person, no one would choose to fly. But the fact is that our combined emissions will lead to the death of a large number of people and jeopardize our entire existence on this planet. This can be hard to get your head around. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and to feel that your own actions don't make a difference. What does it matter what I do? I'm just a small person in a really big world. If we are to solve the climate emergency, we need political solutions, right? Of course we do. But we've been waiting for these solutions for decades, and we are still waiting. If we are to succeed in changing the system, more of us need to demand change. And in order for that to happen, more of us need to wake up and realize that the climate emergency really is an emergency. Talking is not enough. If people are going to listen and take in what we're saying, we also need to act and lead by example. Choosing not to fly, which is something that many people might see as a great sacrifice, is a very effective way to get more people to wake up and realize the severity of the situation. And the same applies to the reverse scenario. If you continue to fly, you signal to people around you that everything is under control and that they can calmly continue to ignore that we're in a climate emergency. Giving up flying is one of the most important things you can do as an individual to reduce your own emissions, but the biggest effect lies in how this decision impacts others. By showing that you are prepared to do what it takes and that you believe your actions matter, more will follow. Are you still not convinced? I'm sure that many of you listening right now are thinking that, okay, so maybe giving up flying would be a good idea, but I'm just not prepared to make that sacrifice. I've spoken to many people who feel this way. Now, imagine that everyone you know, all your friends, your colleagues, your family, imagine that they all told you that they have decided to give up flying until we've solved the climate crisis. How would you react? When I ask people this question, most of them say that, well, in that case, I guess I would be prepared to do so. Our tendency to act like those around us has a great advantage. If enough people take action, change can happen fast. A couple of years ago, some public figures here in Sweden said they had decided to give up flying for the sake of the climate. And since then, more and more people have followed their example. The norm has started to shift, and it's made a difference. From having steadily increased for many years, the number of flights in Sweden fell by 4% last year, and domestic flights fell by a full 9%. This has in turn contributed to a flying debate in many other countries, and people all over the world rethinking their air travel. In a survey conducted by the European Investment Bank, 75% of Europeans, 69% of Americans, and a full 94% of Chinese people claimed they intended to fly less during 2020. And the head of the International Air Transport Association has even described flight shame as the biggest threat to the aviation industry. The term flight shame is misleading though. It is not shame that drives people to give up flying for the sake of the climate, just as it isn't shame that makes us do so to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. It is care for each other and the only planet we've got. And the reason we encourage others to stay on the ground is not to make them feel ashamed. It's in everyone's interest to save the climate, and I'm convinced that most people would happily sacrifice their holiday flights if they truly realized what is at stake. Of course, we can't just stop flying. We need to do much more than that if we are to solve the climate emergency. But we definitely won't succeed if we continue to fly. We need to ask ourselves what we want to say to our children in the future. That we did everything in our power to save them, or that, since we didn't know if we would succeed, we didn't even bother to try. I believe the corona pandemic will make us better equipped for the changes we inevitably need to make to save the climate. I believe that it will make us realize that we cannot take our world for granted, and also realize what is truly important in life. It is not the cancelled holiday flights that people are suffering from right now. It's the lack of social contacts, not being able to spend time with the people we love, and the limited freedom. The transformation needed to solve the climate crisis will be mild in comparison. We can save the climate, we can create a better world, and continue to do the things that really matter at the same time. Of course we would fight for the climate if enough people realized that this crisis is also a matter of life or death. What the world needs now is to replace the corona pandemic with a climate awareness pandemic. And you can help spread it by staying on the ground. Thank you.
Let me introduce to you our next speaker. He is the CEO of Society 3 Group AG and the chairman of the World Innovations Forum Foundation, which is a Swiss-based NGO consisting of entrepreneurs, investors, academia, and governments from around the world. He successfully exited 4 companies, with one of them reaching $5 billion in revenue. He says that his creativity comes from the ability to resist following meaningless rules and to never stop being a dreamer. Please welcome Axel Schulze and his speech about how innovation is triggered by the brain.
Today I want to talk about the beautiful and innovative mind. Basically, it's a story about a research we did for the last 4 years where we try to find out how are we actually create these wonderful ideas. We know a lot about ideas, but we don't know where they come from. All of a sudden, or is there a pattern? So imagine you could innovate at any given point of time. How cool would that be? And there is all about creativity, about innovation. And so I want to give you a test. What about you are now trying to create something wonderful and creative from a platypus and lexicrypt? So we have platypus, lexicrypt. Think about it. Something very creative. Doesn't matter what it is. Just be creative. So you will realize this is actually very difficult. And when I was asked how did I create my 4 companies that I built before, and they were all disruptive and they were all innovative. So people ask, Axel, so how do you think? How is it going on in your mind that you come up 4 times with these companies and you even help startups? And I honestly didn't really know. And at one point somebody said, tell me step by step about your innovative mind. And I realized, okay, I really don't know. So I went back in time and looked what I actually did at Computer 2000, my very first company. So we decided to go develop a business model that is only going indirect, meaning we dealt only with authorized business partners and didn't do any deals on the side. What typically every distributor does. And at the end of the day, everybody said, this is impossible. Actually, you can't do that. You know, distribution is a 5,000-year-old business, is interwoven around the world. You can't just change that. But I was 26 and I thought, I'll give it a try, because I had this idea how I could do that. Now, years later, the company grew to 10 billion in revenue, and we were bypassing basically 8,000 of multi-million-dollar competitor and became the 3rd largest in the world with our startup. When I exited, I went to Silicon Valley and started another company, Blue Roads. And Blue Roads was a software company, and back in the days, you know, early internet days, we started with a software as a service concept, which was, again, totally disruptive and innovative. There were only one company who does this besides us, and that was Salesforce.com. People said, you know, if you want to go to enterprises with that kind of software, this will never work. I mean, forget it. And we actually did not get funding because of that. Plus, there were 2 established giants. And so our idea was different, and it was radical in a way. But 5 years later, we became market leader. So the question is, how was that possible? And I did 2 other companies in a similar manner. And again, how can somebody build a company with $15 or $20 or $50,000 and make a $1 billion company out of it? And we know there are many, many, many. But still, the reason to do that was clear, but how was completely unclear. So in our quest, we thought, you know, we look for other things that are, or other situations that are similar, but possibly entirely different. And we came up with this idea of looking at athletes. You know, they do things today which are kind of amazing. And I'm old enough to realize that 50 years ago, this was simply impossible. So we looked at people climbing up in California, a mountain called Half Dome in Yosemite National Park, And they took about 7 to 10 days to climb up. 7 to 10 days. But now, look what's going on today. 2 hours and 20 minutes. I mean, an unbelievable transformation. And we were saying, well, how is this possible? And we look at something else. Skiers in the 50s. You know, fears going down the slope, and today, in 2000. You know, perfectly balanced. And I mean, an amazing style and absolutely cool looking. And we looked at something else, at the motorbike artists. You know, he's kind of juggling his motorbike, very nice. But 50 years later, people do something very different. So for us, it was the big question. What was the amazing transformation that made that possible? Is it biological evolution? Probably not. Not in 50 years. But we realized that athletes, over time, particularly in the last 50 years, begin to completely understand their body. They try to exactly live with their body, not just mentally, but even understand the physics. My son told me, we can train a single muscle. And I thought, man, a single muscle. And so with that, we were very clear we need to rethink innovation completely. Because we need to start, like the athletes, with our most precious good, and in our case, it's the brain. We need to know how the brain works. The brain is actually the source of all the creativity, so to speak, but we don't even know how. Then we realized also in the sports people, when we interviewed a couple of these superstars, a friend of mine actually is an Olympic gold winner in swimming, and so he told me about the terrain, which every sports guy actually has to live by. They know their terrain deeper and more intense than pretty much anybody else, even the local people, and skiing and so forth. And our terrain as a business person is the market. We need to know the needs and the dreams of our customers. And if we don't, how would we be able to innovate something for them if we don't even know what they're dreaming about? And last but not least, we realized training and equipment. So if you remember that skier back in the 50s and today, the equipment is very different. But I had a chance actually to talk to somebody, and he said, even if you would have given me the best equipment today available, I would not be even able to be close to where these guys are, because they manage their body in a very different way like we did. And so for me, it was very clear we need to understand how we deal with our machine up there, the brain. So let's start with the brain. So the brain brings us a shocking realization. And that was actually by Dr. David Eagleman, a neuroscientist from Stanford University, who postulated, we're actually not creative. Humans, Homo sapiens, cannot create anything. So what we're doing in our brain, and you see this on this picture actually pretty nicely, is we associate ideas, basically, or impressions, from various sources. And even though the brain might look like a shocking machine that we never understand, we probably don't. It's very similar to a chip. When you look into chips, little silicon, 6.9 billion transistors on this one. We don't need to understand this. But what we do understand very well is the machine that uses it, this one. We know our mobile phones, our smartphones. We know how to call, we know how to send messages, we know how to get our calendar, we know how to get our next events, and how to do almost anything that we do with regular computers. Nobody knows how it's done inside, and we don't even care. Cars are so complex these days that we don't know how this engine works, this almost fully electronic machine, and we don't need to. We have our dashboard, and we run pretty fast, but also we can brake pretty fast, and that's all we need to know. The same with our brain. We need to understand the behavior and not the little details that go up there. So in the end of the day, the discovery brings two really major new things. And this is probably more interesting for you than anything else. If we are not creative, we can actually turn it upside down. If everything is composed by ideas that we already had, we can say whatever we can imagine, we can actually make, because all the parts already existed. If we take blue and if we take yellow and we mix it together, we know it's green. But we can take any experience and any other experience and maybe 50 experiences and mix it together and something new pops up. But every of these new ideas are based on the experiences we had. So if this is the way how the brain works, then we also know everybody can actually create amazing ideas because we all have millions and millions of experiences. So at the end of the day, when we put this all together, we can say we are made of things. We know that, right? But so are our ideas. They're not magic. They actually come together from very concrete situations. We only mix it together. So if we now learned that the brain is putting ideas together based on experiences, and experiences are a key driver, we can also begin to understand why some executives, for instance, don't really know where to start because they have a different experience than the market. And if they don't know the market, then they're pretty much off. So in this display, what you just saw, the dashboard, I mean, that was a true innovation because we look through and have a dashboard in front of us. Another car manufacturer built a huge display in the car, which was not so innovative. But because he had a little bit more marketing power, now the rest of the world looks into this not so practical device. And it was basically their experience. And since the market was not understood by most of the bigger car manufacturers, and they put this only in exclusive cars, they couldn't really get the innovation to market. So we put together the 5 big, aspects of innovation, the 5 powers. And it started with, guess what, with experimentation and experiences. So we all have experiences, and that means we all can innovate. And that is a profound basis for new innovation. We're not looking into, okay, let's buy some startup, or let's create some environment and all kind of dream and so on. Why do you dream? What for? If you don't know for whom, it's a total waste of time. But we did not know before. So the second aspect is for our executives. They will love it. No more experimentation. We can do strategic innovation. Wonderful. They can now shift their entire innovation focus completely into a new direction because it's not waiting for some random idea, because now it is actually a strategic development in a certain direction for the customers and make them ridiculously exciting because they now hopefully know how it works. The third step obviously then is the way to create those ideas. And we realized a couple things. So you saw this brain piece earlier with the connections in between. The brain has a cool function. It actually prevents us from going too crazy. It helped us for the last 5 million years to stay in our realm, and if there's a tiger, freeze. In that moment, it saved more lives than any information and any innovation back in the days for millions of years. But we're not attacked by tigers anymore, and not by geographies and by other people and so on. So we can actually go crazy. And the next step for going crazy is then understanding, and this is what we are innovating for, the market. What do we actually want to do in this market? So innovation to market, meaning get the product, the idea into the market, is a huge effort. And most people completely underestimate because, it's like a startup. You have to be there very, very quickly. Now, and what did our athletes say at the third element? They said we need training and the best possible equipment. And so one of the biggest challenge for us was to get all the bits and pieces of information in these innovation sessions that go far beyond classical brainstorming together. And if we have 20, 30 people, and maybe even 20, 30, 50 people from customers who contribute their ideas and actually validate them, then we end up with about 2,000 to 5,000 bits and pieces of innovative information. And that was obviously a shocking realization for us because we did have no tools at all. So we invented basically a digital canvas system, multi-user, multi-discipline, because it's not only engineers, but also marketing and sales and so forth, and mix it up and put some AI system behind to realize what comes from what, build relations, but also build priorities. And so at the end of the day, we have an information set that we can use for our innovation. Call it innovation management system. So with that said, at the end of the day, we can actually empower our team to be far more innovative. We can get them all the way to the top because we now know how our machine brain works. We know that we are actually born creative, and we can simply unleash the power even for those people who don't think that they are creative, just don't know that. They get very quickly, and this is something else what our brain is actually marvelous good about, they actually can loosen up within a couple of weeks training to become actually creative. And we know this from many people who do painting classes and come back and say, I can't believe it. I can't believe that I can do that. Well, the same is actually with innovation. You will be able to do that. Thank you very much.
Felipe unravels why so much food is going to waste across supply chains and what is currently going on. Food waste is an environmental mess, and by wasting food, we are not only throwing away the produce, but also the resources within, such as water, land, and energy. By further digging into the problem through his many experiences, Felipe has built a movement against food waste. He says that all segments of society can do their part in reducing food waste. Please welcome Felipe Schuler and his speech, Food Waste, the solution to the greatest challenges of our time.
Hello everyone, my name is Philipp Schuler, Global Movement Coordinator at the social impact company Too Good To Go, and a Luxembourger. No, not the usual burger one would expect maybe, but yes, I do have a deep connection with food, and I'm truly in love with it. And therefore, nothing hurts me more than the following statistic. Every second, 51 tons of food are thrown away around the world. If some of you find it hard to imagine what 1 ton of food waste really looks like, then have a look at this picture, taken in the disposal area of a hotel. Now multiply this room full of bins 51 times, every single second. Food is beautiful, diverse, tasty, and fulfilling, and yet we treat it like garbage. In the past, we used to be hunters and gatherers. We spent endless hours looking for food. We struggled day in, day out, as it was never consistently available to us. With modern agriculture, this all started to change. By using the forces of nature, we started growing and cultivating it ourselves. For the first time, we were able to embrace an abundant amount of food, allowing us to rapidly grow in numbers, but also to start focusing on other things. In many ways, it has kick-started mankind's unstoppable development. Nowadays, this ever-growing abundance means that we have lost the true value of food. We are now accustomed to have full shelves and full plates at all times. With the outbreak of a crisis, such as the corona pandemic, one is suddenly confronted with empty shelves and having to cook at home, making us realize more than ever that food is our life force and that we need to treat it with gratitude. As a society, we are also becoming more affluent, but also spending less and less money on food. To give you an idea, it is estimated that an average European only spends 10% of his or her monthly income on food. Additionally, we all no longer know where all of this food is coming from, as food is traveling longer distances, making us even more disconnected and dissociated. All in all, we have lost the respect for food. nor do we value the resources within. Throwing away this potato here may only take a mere second, but it took a tremendous amount of time, energy, and sweat to even bring it this far. Yes, by wasting food, we're also wasting the resources within. The thousands of liters it took to irrigate and wash it, the labor we needed to pick it, the fertilizers that help it to grow undisturbed, the fuel it takes to transport, the electricity we needed to cool it, all the forest that had to be cleared to make way for farmland. Food waste is in many ways an environmental mess. And yet, it also provides us with a massive opportunity to tackle the three greatest challenges of our time. We know that we're in the middle of a climate crisis. Greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise, much of which is stemming from the food industry itself. We are now also over 7 billion people on this planet, and it is estimated that by 2050 we will be 10 billion, all whilst 800 million people go to bed hungry every single day. This means unlimited growth on a planet with limited space and resources is simply not sustainable, as we continue to deplete our natural world at unprecedented rates. And yet, it is also no secret that we're running out of water. Irrigation for food accounts for 70% of all the fresh water we use, while in comparison our daily use to wash or clean at home only make up a small fragment. We're also in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. Converting forest area into farmland for crops and space for livestock is currently the biggest driver of deforestation around the world, and with that also the main cause for biodiversity loss. And even our oceans have nowhere to hide. The deadly runoff filled with fertilizers we use to produce food is polluting our seas and with that all marine life. We can simply not continue with business as usual. My message is therefore very clear. By tackling food waste, we can counteract the three biggest challenges of our time: climate change, growing population, and the destruction of our natural world. So now you might ask, well, Philip, what can be done? And what am I actually doing about all of this? Well, for me, it all started with dumpster diving and a potato. During my time as a student in Copenhagen, while all others would go to grocery stores, my flatmates and I decided to head out after closing time and to inspect bin after bin to find edible food thrown away by the stores. Of course, we did save a lot of money with that, but for us the frequent outings became weekly treasure hunts, where we challenged ourselves to only cook with the food that we found. Recipes were only there for inspiration, and cooking became like a creative experiment. And I can tell you, the treasures were bountiful. To give you an idea, in one bin alone, we managed to find 116 bananas, 15 kilos of broccoli, 3 kilos of peppers, and the list goes on. And I promise you, it is not a good idea to eat that many bananas. And yet, it also opened my eyes. For the first time, it made me realize the sheer magnitude of the problem. It made me question, how could this all possibly happen? And yet, it is not making the news as much as it should. Most disturbingly, we found food that was still perfectly edible and that could have been stored for so many more weeks if it was taken care of properly. In that outing alone, we also found 23 kilos of potatoes, a product that my mom told me from an early age was amongst the most durable vegetables out there, and yet they were a common sight in the bins. So for me, it meant jumping out of the bin and digging further. I now had a mission: unravel the mystery behind it all. And so what did I do? I hired a car, took my camera, and left Copenhagen to visit potato farms. I really wanted to start understanding what the main reasons were for wasting so many potatoes and see for myself whether this was happening at all stages of its life, from the moment they were grown all the way to the supermarket. And what I found was simply crazy. For a product that by nature, as you can see, is never really uniform or free of dents or blemishes, the size, shape and color did matter and was in the end the main reasons why the potato was thrown away. They were selected and rejected based on their appearance. So a massive amount never even made it to the grocery store. And the most striking thing of all, neighboring pig farms did not want the rejects either. For pig farmers, it had become more profitable to feed their pigs with more digestible soy flown in from abroad than feeding them with discarded potatoes from their neighbors. It comes to show that our desire for large quantities of cheap and pretty food comes at a massive cost. It now can be debated whether this is down to us consumers demanding these prettier potatoes or whether it is the supermarkets that have created this perception in our minds that only perfectly looking food is actually good enough for us. But it also shows that decisions made by us consumers have implications further down the line. The pretty few, those good enough for the runway maybe, make it all the way down to the grocery store. And even there, some of them still end up in the bin. Not because of their appearance this time, but because of the date written on the package they are wrapped in. While only the very, 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 very lucky ones make it all the way back home. But there they suffer and rot as we no longer know how to store food properly. The FAO estimates that almost half of the entire world production of roots and tubers, that includes vegetables such as potatoes or carrots, is never actually consumed. Half of the entire production. I simply couldn't let go of these insights. And after my studies, I decided to do something about it, for my love of food and nature. And so I wanted to find out more on how food currently travels from left to right, and whether food is also wasted at the warehouses, at the airports, or by the airlines. And so this time, I cheated on my beloved potato and went for the Brazilian papaya that is flown into European grocery stores every single day. And even here, food was wasted, as the businesses involved could not align on a common temperature to keep the papaya from rotting. Still now, work is ongoing on how we can better collaborate and be more transparent in order to give papayas a chance to survive this long journey. So after that, I packed my backpack and I flew to Bangkok. No, not to party, but it was time to get my hands dirty and to work closely with those people that make the magic happen, the chefs. Together with a small team, we trained hotels and restaurants in both Thailand and in the Maldives on how they can prevent food waste in their daily operations. And the clue was, by simply measuring the amount of food that is going to waste, involving all staff from the different departments, and reshuffling the buffets, we were able to drive home some incredible results. But then, in the end, I realized that in order to bring about the systemic shift so bitterly needed in the food system, it was not enough to look at one solution, one geography, or one segment alone, but to instead include everyone in the conversation. We have to acknowledge that the climate emergency, the loss of biodiversity, and the subsequent impact on our health all stem from a common crisis, the food crisis. And we will never be able to stop this crisis without tackling food waste. Yes, it is truly time to build a movement against food waste. Now, more than ever, it is essential to bring everyone together, to show solidarity and to work as one towards a common goal. We now have all the right solutions out there, the tools, the technology, everything that we need, we have it. And we also know what is going wrong. The only thing that is missing is a certain sense of urgency and will. And this means everyone finding food waste together. Schools, politics, businesses, and consumers. This means we need to influence the young ones and to teach them the true value of food and why it is so important to preserve our planet. At the same time, we need policymakers and governments ensuring that all these changes in legislation are made, national targets are taken seriously, and solutions and best practices are shared between nations. And also, we need food services to start looking at their daily operations and decide not to overproduce, overfill plates and buffets. At the same time, we also need to look at the other ones, such as retailers, who need to start adjusting date labels on packaging and taking the lead in educating us consumers on how to better store food. And also, it needs each and every one of us. It requires all of us to be open in changing our habits and behaviors by demanding this imperfect potato or fruit and vegetable, embracing our leftovers, planning ahead, and using our senses on whether food is still edible or not. Only by each and every one of us doing their part, we will be able to achieve a planet with no food waste. A world where all food produced is also food consumed. To put things in perspective, since the start of this talk, an equivalent of 21 million potatoes have been thrown away around the world. In a time where each of us is trying to find the best way to be sustainable and really feel like we are making a difference, there's nothing more fulfilling and impactful than reducing food waste. It is in no doubt the most simple and immediate action we can take against climate change, the destruction of the natural world, and to support our planet with an exploding world population. Thank you.
Now on to our second and last Q&A session. So let's go to the speakers. So hi everyone. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, hi. So I
Muted.
have
Hi.
Hi. So I have questions for everybody. So I'm gonna start off with Lionel. Are you there?
Yes. Here we go.
Hi. So the first
Hello.
question is for you. How do you come up with new magic tricks?
Oh, very good question. Well, I'm inspired by daily life. So now by the coronavirus, of course, and otherwise I'm just like walking the streets from time to time, like also sitting in a coffee or something like this, and looking what people are doing, and yes, and looking what's going on like in daily life and politics and all this, and that brings me like to new ideas.
Thank you so much. Okay, so hi Maya.
Hi.
Hi. So the next question is for you. Okay, so let me read it to you. Do you think that rewards for alternative means of transportation could help reduce flying? Hello?
Yes, of course. I think if we are going to reduce flying, I think we need a combination of many different things. So I don't think that alone will be enough. I think we need to shift the norm, and we need different political solutions as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so on to our next question. Axel, are you ready? Okay, you're just muted. Yes.
Muted.
Hi. Okay, so the question is for you. How do you personally deal with opposition to great ideas?
With opposition?
Yes.
Okay. I think great ideas, I mean, really unusual ideas, force opposition almost per definition, because our brain rejects new things very quickly, and it takes a while to adapt those new ideas. So, you know, I'm simply trying to help the other party to understand what the new idea is and what the benefits are or what the risks are.
Okay, thank you for that. So the next question I have is for Felipe. Are you ready?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
So this question is from Karen. So she's saying that how are you feeling, how are you facing the coronavirus situation because all of the restaurants are closed right now?
Yeah, so that's of course a very big problem at the moment because we are not able to save all these meals going to waste because of course they're out of operation. So the way we're helping directly with restaurants is that we have started an initiative called We Care, where we help to support independent stores to come join us on our platform for free, and so they are able to actually sell food via takeaway. So instead of opening up their store or their restaurant for people coming in and to have food, they can do takeaway via our application. So this is how we help independent stores. But because restaurants are closed, most of them around the world, around Europe, what we're also doing is working very closely with supermarkets, of course, bakeries who are still open. And of course, that's also keeping our business running as well.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Okay, so back to Lionel.
Yes.
Hi. So the second question is from Margarita. So she's asking, why did you decide to become a magician?
Well, I was fascinated by magic all my life, and I think like in childhood almost everybody is, and it's like also like a little bit of chance and whatever. I have always continued. I started when I was a child, and I continued, and I never stopped. And yes, I worked during the university and all this, like to have a little bit of money to study and all this, and yeah, and then it got bigger. I got some TV shows and all this, and it was like just increasing. And when I finished my studies, I could make a living out of it, and then the decision was actually taken by this, more or less.
You were born to be an entertainer. Okay. Thank you for your answer. Okay, so the next question is for you, Maya. So a quick one. So when did you give up flying?
I gave up flying 11 years.
So 11 years ago. Okay, thank
Ago
you so
now.
much. Okay. Okay, so back to Felipe.
Yes.
Okay, so the question is, how do you get stores to join Too Good To Go?
So you can do it in different ways, of course, by encouraging going to your local store and really telling them about the application. A lot of them will usually say we don't really have food waste, but that is it's not possible. I think every store really has a certain amount of degree of food waste. And so really making sure to tell them that this is something that would be good for them as a business, but you would also be happy to come buy food from them as well while being on the app, and also besides that as well. So you can actively encourage stores to come on the application as well.
Okay, thank you. Last question, okay, is from Elena to Axel. Sorry, I think I must have missed you. Is innovation good all the time?
Well, innovation is always good if it's in the interest for improving something or in the interest of humanity or nature. These three combinations. And I mean, the nuclear bomb is actually a bad idea, but the innovation wasn't about the bomb; it was about nuclear power. And as we know, we're a very power-hungry species, so we have power plants all over, and so the power is actually a good thing to have. And so innovation has almost always kind of a little bit of a dark side, and very much depends on the perspective and how people actually use the innovation.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. So we still have time for a couple more. Okay, so a question for Felipe. The question is from the OBM YouTube. What advice do you have to give for restaurants to reduce food waste?
I think the first advice that I can definitely give to restaurants is to measure the amount of food being wasted. So as I mentioned before, a lot of them don't agree that they have food waste, but that is also because most of them don't even separate their waste. So plastic goes with cardboard goes with food. And of course, as waste accumulates, they lose track of how much of that is really food. So if they start actually separating waste and measure how much is being wasted, they can quickly realize that there is actually a lot of food being wasted, and then they can dig down and find out, okay, what are the reasons behind it? Once you know the reasons, then you can act upon it. And so this is definitely a suggestion I would give.
Thank you so much. So a question for Maya. Yes. So the question from the nomad next door. She's asking, for a single person, how many hours of flight per year do you think is acceptable? And how much is too much?
Well, I wish I could say that yes, there are some hours that you can fly every year, but it's very difficult, even if you just do the most necessary things in the society we live now, it's very difficult to come down to sustainable levels. So there really are no flight hours at all if we can avoid it. And most flights can be avoided. I know that there are some flights that are crucial, rescue flights and things like that. But when it comes to holiday flights, really nobody have to go on holiday since we're in a climate emergency, and this really is an emergency. So for now, I would say 0. But if we do everything we can to save the climate now, we may be able to fly again in the future.
Okay. So what do you say about people who live on an island? How would you get there if it weren't for flying? Okay, so it looks like the connection is cut off. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, so Maya, I think your connection is a bit off right now. So a question for Lionel. Okay, this question is from Sabina. She's asking, is it a special egg made for the trick, or is it a natural one that has a really thin shell? So which one is it? So what's the egg made out of?
I'm actually not 100% sure what's the material, but it's a special egg. You can buy it. There are like stores for magicians, as like we have like convenience stores and whatever, and it's a special egg made there. Yeah, it's just a little bit harder than normal egg, because otherwise, if you would like drop it or something like this, it would grow. So it's a special egg with a hole.
So our next question is for Axel. I think this is going to be our last question. So Axel, how do you plan physical workshops? Are there any creativity techniques and methods that you would advise in order to encourage creative actions?
So I didn't quite understand the first. How do I plan physical workshops?
Yes. How do you plan?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually don't do physical workshops. Okay. So we are totally digital. We train people even today. Obviously per digital. We do, however, we did physical so-called boot camps. So we did a boot camp in the beginning and try to help people understand and get together, kind of feel and smell. And then after we did this for a week, then we go back and actually work from home or from office or wherever we are, so we can easily do digital.
Okay.
So the interesting thing about it is that once you met a person once for more than an hour, then you have already a very chemistry related connection. And then everything else can be digital for probably 2 years until you renew that relationship.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. So I'd like to thank the speakers for participating. So now let's go back to the video. Thank you so much.
Can I just ask you something?
Yes.
Like when we're doing on the 5th of May, would you like us to mute the microphone just to be safe?
Yes. So.
I always put it on mute just to be safe. So I have Axel on mute, Philip.
Yes.
We have come to an end,
yes.
ladies and gentlemen.
So technically, I could put every digital TEDx Hochschule Luzern event this year. I hope you, the viewers at home, have enjoyed the lineup of speakers this year. Before I close the event, I would like to mention a special thanks to the OBM students, Mr. McKevitt and Esteban Castle, who has tirelessly organized HSLU's first ever digital TEDx. Secondly, a huge thanks to our sponsors, Hochschule Luzern, Matteo Oliveira Saavedra, and Groovetide. Then I would like to thank the speakers, wherever they may be tonight, who have participated in this very special format. And last but not least, give yourself an applause. You were a great audience, and we all thank you for being a part of this event. Have a great evening and stay safe.